Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Collier Prize Showcase. Our next session features an exciting project developed in California by the investigative nonprofit CalMatters. It's called Digital Democracy. Here to unpack it for us, we have Neil Chase, the CEO of CalMatters. Neil was previously executive editor of the Mercury News and the East Bay Times, where his team won the 2017 Pulitzer Prize for breaking news coverage. He's worked as an editor at the San Francisco Examiner, CBS MarketWatch, and the New York Times, and was an assistant professor at Northwestern. But we forgive him for that.
Got to work somewhere.
And Dave Lesher, who co-founded CalMatters and led the creation of Digital Democracy, an unprecedented custom-built AI tool that tracks every word spoken in California legislative public hearings, every dollar donated to politicians, every bill introduced, every vote cast, and more. And with that, Neil, Dave.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Rick. It's a real honor to be here at such a fascinating school where thousands of people wanted to go into journalism and communications. It's really, really heartening and good to see an amazing facility. Let me take you back 10 years, I guess almost 12 years now. A state senator in California, a Republican in the leadership in the state Senate, more of a moderate Republican, whatever that means these days, was leaving Sacramento after redistricting, and he was out of office, goes back home to San Luis Obispo, beautiful place on the coast, halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco, if you don't know it, and didn't have a real good feeling about the experience he'd just been through. The way the money influenced things in Sacramento, the way you would get a bill that was this thick 10 seconds before you had to vote on it and have no idea what's in it and have to ask some lobbyist to explain it to you. And thought the legislature should work better and people should know more about it. And he got together with the folks at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, the university, created a center merging computer science and political science together, two sciences. For those of us who are poli-sci majors, we claim it's a science. And he was able to put this project together that is the roots of what we're going to show you today. And the whole idea was, let's take all the information we can find about the state government and make it available to the people who hire those people to go to Sacramento and represent them, the people who elect those people, the people who pay their bills, pay their salaries, and usually don't hear much about them in between. National politics gets all the attention, right? Some people know about their local politics. What happens in Sacramento, a $300 billion annual budget, the fifth largest economy in the world, matters really deeply to everybody in California. It affects their education, their health care, their housing, the environment, and most of them don't know it. Most of them don't pay a lot of attention to it. So they created this tool called Digital Democracy, got all the video from the state legislature, made it easy to use, easy to search, easy to watch, easy to make little clips of and send them to your friends, and brought in a bunch of data to help understand what's going on in California. It was funded at first by the Arnolds in Houston, Laura and John Arnold, who are great supporters of journalism. And they ran this thing for 5 years. And it did an amazing job of making government available and transparent. And as it grew, they expanded it to Texas and New York and Florida. And then after 5 years, they started looking at it and thinking, is this really doing what we want to do? Is it having the impact we want to have? You can imagine journalists were using it all the time, lobbyists, people involved in government, but it hadn't really gotten a lot of attention. It wasn't informing the public. So they took a pause, and they did some surveys of journalists, and we started talking to them. And what we're going to show you today is Digital Democracy 2.0. Dave is the co-founder of CalMatters, which started 10 years ago this summer, exactly the same time Digital Democracy was going public. So he'd been watching it the whole time and was able to bring us into a conversation with them about the last mile. It's great we have all this information, we have all the video. What do we do with it? How do we get it to people? And I was relieved to find out the answer is journalism, right? Take this information, make it available and easy to use for journalists, put it in the hands of journalists, let them write stories about it that get to people and actually explain what's going on in the state government to the people who care about it. And so We're going to show you today how it works and what it does. We are currently using it in the CalMatters newsroom. We are spreading it out to newsrooms around California, and we are looking at how to get it all over the country, especially with our friends at the Texas Tribune, from whom we have stolen every idea we had in how to build CalMatters for the last 15 years. So finally we get to give them one of our things. It's not quite fair, but we'll do it. They have a big advantage. They've been a huge model for us. So I think what we're going to do first is let Dave come up and take you through it and explain it. And then we'll talk a little bit about where it goes from here, the impact it's had, what we think we're going to do with it. And we would love to take your questions, but also have a conversation with you about how we make this more useful all over the country. Dave.
Great. So digital democracy is really a response to the opacity, the increasing opacity in government. And, you know, I was an LA Times reporter covering politics for a long time, and including the state government for a while. And I can tell you profoundly that, you know, the opacity of state government in California is very different. The policy-making process has changed. You know, it used to be much more, the strategy to get a bill passed was to build public momentum through the media, to push something through the legislature. And now it's really a strategy of internal counting heads and backroom discussions, which, you know, the media and the public involvement is more of a distraction than a help. So it's profoundly different. And, you know, I think that's what this tool, to me, helps us penetrate. It's like, you know, we'll talk about it and I'll show it to you, but, you know, it's like having a mini investigative reporter in every single bill discussion in the Capitol. Even in the heyday of journalism, we couldn't do that. I mean, this little tool is listening to every word spoken, and then it goes out and it finds all the data relevant to that discussion and puts it in one place for a reporter. And it does that in there's 5,000 bills in California, every 2-year session. And every bill, well, some of them die early, but, you know, some of them have multiple hearings and floor sessions. It's all in the database. So there's a tool that you have that's watching all of this and watching the relationships between money and between legislators and supporters and opponents and their alignment in terms of past voting history and things like that. So you can really put together stories that you could never see before. You know, I also think, I really do think this is part of the future of journalism in an important way. You know, I think artificial intelligence is going to be everywhere. It's going to be in journalism. I mean, what we're doing with digital democracy is really training artificial intelligence on what data is in government and what are the patterns in the policy-making process so that it can identify the anomalies. And what do journalists want to know? What do reporters need to write a story? And, you know, we've been working on this for like 2.5 years. I mean, the AI has advanced so much in just that period. I mean, literally, just in the last couple of weeks and a couple of months, we've added different capacities for AI to improve what we've been doing. And, you know, I still think we're in our adolescent years in terms of the story ideas that we know AI is going to be able to generate, but it's come a long way in just the last year. Last year, we spent pretty much the year training the AI. So I'm going to give you a quick tour, and then, you know, I'll show you some of the stories we did, and then happy to talk questions and everything else. But you know, basically, there's this giant database, just in terms of what it is. Like, as we said, it has all this information, 6 different kinds of money, you know, everything from gifts and travel to donations and PACs and all their demographic district from their district, or demographic data from their district, election results, you know, poverty rates, voter registration. In addition to all the transcripts, I can search any word that's ever been spoken in a public meeting for the last 3 years. And so all that goes into a database that's really, it's all public government data, but it's all pulled into one place so that you can query it with one query. I mean, all this stuff is out there. You can go find it, but it would take weeks or months for a reporter to go out and stitch it together. And with it all in one place, we can do it like that. And so, so there's two things we do with that database. One is we populate this website, which I'll show you in a minute, but it's really designed for a broad public audience to give understanding and access to the state government. You know, who is your legislator? What do we have about them in all the data we have? And then what's the agenda this year for the major issues in California? What's happening on K-12 education, on environment, on healthcare? And then the third part about the website is you can geek out on it. You can dive in, and there's a very powerful access to that huge database, and you can, you know, go as minuscule as you want to. So that's one use, and the other use is something. It's what we call tip sheets. It's where there's artificial intelligence scanning this data constantly in real time as hearings are held, as votes are taken, and it's trained to look for story ideas for reporters. And when it sees a story idea, it prints a one-page, what we call a tip sheet. And I'll show you one, but it, you know, it basically has the story idea, and then it pulls quotes from the hearings and all the data that it has that's relevant to that conversation in terms of the parties involved, supporters and opponents, and things like that. So, so I do think, like I say, this is some part of the future of journalism. I hope you young people who are going to be in this business for a long time, you remember back to, wow, I remember when AI was just being started in newsroom. Yeah. Well, I was an intern at the LA Times long ago on typewriters. So, you know, to go from typewriters to AI has been quite a span.
Manual.
Yeah, manual. Oops. Oh, 3 fingers.
There you go.
So this is the landing page, but I just first want to show you this is the search bar to access the database, and so it's a very powerful search bar. And you can type in a keyword, anything, and you know, I typed in gators just to see if anything was relevant, but nobody has mentioned the word gators in California legislature for the last 3 years. I can tell you that. So let me just. Let me just type in artificial intelligence. And so I can see every bill that is about artificial intelligence, either this year or the past years. I can go to every time the term artificial intelligence has been mentioned. I can go straight to the hearing where that word was mentioned. I can see
I had some concerns about the artificial intelligence components of this bill.
I can see the video and the transcript. I can jump ahead on the transcript and it'll track in the video. I can quote. I can link here to either copy this quote or in a story or in social media. I can link to this exact spot in the transcript and the video. I can, you know, this is the Senate floor, but here is the agenda for every bill that they were talking about that day, and it isolates out the bill discussion for each bill. And then I can look at, there's a page for every single bill that's introduced, and I can see, you know, the list of supporters and opponents. And we have a link to the source of that position that they took, whether it's in testimony or whether they filed a document with the committee taking a position. And sometimes their positions change, so that's why we put the date there. You can confirm where that comes from. Everything in here is from public government documents. And I should say also the AI, there's a lot of different kinds of AI, obviously, and we use multiple different kinds of AI in digital democracy, but the AI that generates the tip sheet doesn't go out on the web. It just scans this database, and everything it puts on a tip sheet is linked to the original source, and the original source is all government public documents. So the reporter doesn't have to they can always double check where that came from. I can see the votes of every time this bill was in a hearing, and who voted against, who voted for, and then I can see the video of every time this bill came up in each hearing. And then, oops, let me just jump ahead again. So I can go to the last time this was in a committee hearing, and you'll see it'll list everybody who spoke at the hearing. Everybody who has spoken in a California hearing for the last 3 years has a web page on digital democracy. And all the data that we have on that person is collected on that page. Anytime they took a position on a bill, anytime they donated money, anytime they, or whatever affiliations they have, whatever data we have on them. So, you know, like Dominic Damari is a lobbyist. Here is all the testimony he's given, who it was on behalf of, where it was, video to all those testimonies. And he's a registered lobbyist, so we have extra data on those people. But, you know, it's the same thing with, I don't know, Glenn Beck's. He's obviously represented all these different groups in different positions they've taken. And then there's two last things on the website I want to show you. One is the legislator pages. So one of the things we thought people would come to the site for is to know who these people are. And so there's a lot of, we tried to make this, you know, as non-intimidating as possible. You know, like this isn't a site for insiders or geeks. It's, you know, there's a banner image on every legislator page that's a picture of their district. You know, we have a little bit of bio stuff at the top, but then there are a series of data visualizations that we created that pull together a lot of data and kind of display it. This alignment meter is a lot of fun. You can put in any organization that's ever taken a position on a bill in California, and you can see how this legislator has voted in alignment with that organization, and you can see how much money that organization has given to this legislator. Wow. And there's 10 to 20,000 organizations in the database. Here's a breakdown of all the money this candidate or this legislator has gotten. This is the money direct to their campaign. Here's all the money they've gotten from PACs, and here's a total, and this bar shows how that relates to other legislators. And then here's all the what I call influence money. This is money that's given to legislators after they are elected. You know, so it's gifts and travel and behests. Behests in California is when a legislator asks you to donate to a nonprofit or another organization on my behalf, or they have to report those. So all that data is in there. Then here's the bills, all the bills this legislator has authored, all the committees that they're on, all the interest groups and how they are ranked. You know, all the ones, you know, where they're over 50% and under 50%. All their most recent substantive comments, we had to weed out all the I'm here or, you know, welcome and let's get started. And then a profile of their district. You know, the map, there's all the demographic data you can look at by different metrics, the election results, and the voter registration. And then lastly, or almost lastly, you can get to a lot of this data through these directories. Every organization has a page. Like I said, I pick on CTA because they're very active. But one of the things we did, like if you know data, in the data there's an organization will go by a lot of different names. You know, California Teachers Association goes by a lot of different references because we're pulling from about 100 different databases. And so we put a list of all the identifications that we are assigning to California Teachers Association, and we sent out, you know, if we get anything wrong, let us know. I mean, we try to be very conservative about what we attribute to them, but it's, you know, the data is dirty and we clean it up as much as we can, but that's just transparency is the end plan on how to deal with that. And then see, here's all the people who have represented CTA in the legislature over the last couple of years. Here's all their lobbying representations. Here's all the positions they have taken on bills. Here's all the money they have given to legislators. And here's all the video of their presentations. So, and then, okay, now lastly about this. These are the topic pages that the agenda for 2025 is just getting started in California, so they're not filled out completely yet, but our beat reporters curate these topic pages in terms of what are the key bills on education, on environment, on healthcare, and then we actually use the database to populate who are the key leaders on these topics by, you know, who are the people who have taken the most positions on K-12 bills or been most active in testimony or in taking positions. And then we have a look at the legislator at a glance by a lot of different demographic metrics. And then, you know, kind of a fun thing, we just do the top and bottom 10 lists of a lot of different things like money. And the funny thing is we have the most talkative. This went viral in the legislature. I mean, we literally have people who get up, legislators who get up and say, I'm number 2 on CalMatters talkative list, and I'm going to talk until I'm number 1. You know, so that's the website. And I want to jump to the tip sheets now. But is there anything to ask about now?
I'm just trying to understand how. Yeah, you don't need a mic with me.
Oh, it's for the live stream.
I know.
Yeah.
How all of this is gathered. I understand documents that are filed, but I mean, like, is there the state-run legislative television network that you have plugged into a computer? I mean, where are you getting? How is the video collected? How is all of this collected?
Yeah, so the video comes from the legislature, and we just thankfully, because of a proposition that California has to put all of the hearings on video and make it public. This year, just this month for the first time, we're not waiting for them to post it. We're actually grabbing the transcript off the live video feed. So it cut about 12 to 24 hours in speeding up what we can get to reporters from each hearing. And then the rest of the data comes from all different kinds of things. I mean, we have an API for the money, the travel money, and some of those things are actually on financial disclosure forms they have to fill out, and they're on paper. And so literally, we got Cal State Sacramento students to come in and have pizza and digitize all these paper documents so that they can be in the database.
We also paid them.
Is there anything that you couldn't put on there? I mean, it seems like there's pretty much everything, but is there anything that you wanted to put on there that you couldn't, or?
You know, I mean, we had a bunch of reporters coming up with data sources that we wanted, and it was a kitchen sink, and I haven't seen anything yet. If it exists, you know, I mean, there's probably things that we want, but they don't collect that data. But yeah, we have everything we could think of is in there.
I'll come to you next.
This is a very interesting tool. Here in Florida, we have a sunshine law that everything is, as much as they can, everything is public. But one way to go around is that now they have contracts. And in those contracts, these are not made public. What's the content in it? So that's an issue that may come up. in terms of your different sections at the bottom, I would maybe add appropriations or budgets and vetoes, because there's a lot of money that is being discussed at the end when the budget is being ratified, and I think that would be very interesting. And what's the status of developing something like that for Florida?
I would love to do this in Florida. It's probably on the short list because, as Neil said, the V1 of digital democracy was done in Florida. So the back end of digital democracy was built at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And so they're familiar with the databases in California. And yeah, as far as the budget goes, we pick it up in the hearings right now, but we're still, I mean, one of the things this year is to pull in databases from the executive branch, which will, there's a lot of things we want to do with. Look for regulations, look for budget, look for the impact of bills. You know, there's a housing bill, did it work? So that's, there's still more to do here.
Yeah, the folks who've been funding this, I mentioned the Arnolds, the Knight Foundation, some other folks, they really do want to see this go nationwide. We've had a lot of partners come to us and say, can we do this in our state, including the journalism school here, which would be a tremendous partner for this because so much of that work is already done in this building. We're trying to get it right. We're doing a couple states now. If we can make that work properly, it's one of the surprising things, I think, to a lot of folks is one of the biggest hurdles we have is transcription, right? Obviously, there are AI tools out there that can transcribe things. But when Dave was showing you the California Teachers Association, all the different things they're called, all the different ways they're referred to, and all these big unions have nicknames and things that are referred to on the floor all the time. If we can't associate that entity to find out that money to that legislator was from the same organization that spoke in favor of that bill, and from the same organization that gave that legislator this rating, then the data's kind of useless. The AI can't go in there and find the associations that generate story ideas. We like to think of this, there was a time when there were over 130 reporters assigned full-time to the California State Capitol, actually to the building being there. The governor's press secretary had a list of 130 people he had to reach out to have a press conference. That number was down to almost nothing at the time Dave started CalMatters 10 years ago. But what those reporters did is they saw stuff, right? And you might see something and make a note of it. Why is that person talking to that person? Scribble something in your notebook. Who was at the bar with whom? Dave's office looks right down on the bar of the Sheraton Hotel next to the Capitol. It's a great view he's got. But we don't have that many people doing that anymore, but that's one of the things the tool can do is look for these anomalies. It can only do that if the data is not just accurate transcripts, but if the entities are properly assigned. So we have students at San Luis Obispo who go through the transcripts that are initially generated and make those associations, identify the speakers, right? Bob, the soccer coach who spoke about a bill to build more parks, and Robert, the lobbyist from Chevron who spoke about an oil issue, turned out to be the same person. You need a human to look at that data, at least now. I get it, AI will do everything someday. Can't wait for it to replace CEOs. But right now, that most important link is Cal Poly students who get paid hourly to do this. That's one of the hurdles in growing the transcription to other states, just the amount of time it takes to do that. But we are rebuilding the database to make sure it can work in multiple states. We're looking at other states' video availability. We're working with our partners in newsrooms and journalism schools in various states. And I'm hoping we're in a number of states within the next 2 years. So.
Yeah. There's still a lot more to evolve here. The transcription is a big one, we're bringing in, we're testing out right now. I would like to be able to query the database with natural language questions. I think that would open it up not just for reporters but to a public audience much more broadly. And so I know artificial intelligence is going to be there very soon. I don't want to bring in something that's going to pull hallucinations out of the database. And so we're doing an experiment with a group called Cubist that has an AI tool that we can limit it to this database and use natural language, and we'll see how that goes. But like I said, just since digital democracy started, I mean, the applications for AI have just grown. We use ChatGPT in a lot of different ways, but it's not public-facing. So let me show you, the other part that I think is just game-changing.
I think.
You just showed for California Teachers Association, there looked to be roughly a dozen different ways of identifying them in, I assume, campaign finance reports, among other things.
Yeah.
How do you then aggregate contributions from all 12 of these identified organizations under the umbrella of California Teachers Association? And the second question is, have you ever made any mistakes? We saw with Charles Minshew's performance, we saw Orange County, Florida School District with a $6.5 billion budget.
Yeah. So we've actually built a dashboard. You know, I mean, you can imagine this database is enormous, absolutely enormous. There's, you know, a couple, 10 to 20,000 organizations in there. And so there's a dashboard for, you know, Cal Poly students and some of our staff that leads them to go through and look for all the similar names. So you can, the dashboard is pretty easy. You can look at similar names and then you can pull all the ones that you want to put over to combine over on this side of the screen. And once you do that, then the database treats them all as the same.
And have you ever made mistakes? Has anyone ever said, no, I never got $100,000 from the...
You know, there's been a lot of little things. We had somebody's district wrong. We had the map was in the wrong place. You know, we had you know, nothing big. Nothing. No organization has ever pushed back on, you know, that's not how much we gave, or any organization, stuff like that.
And part of that is the universe of data, right? It's a broad universe of data, but it's a very selective thing. It's the data feeds we pulled in from these, what is it, dozens, 100+ sources. Just the job of running all those data acquisition tools is a full-time engineering role, but it is sources we've pulled in, and that's all it's looking at, right? So you're not going to see, you know, some social media post where somebody says some school district spent $12 trillion last year. It is government data, as good as government data can be, cleaned up as best we can by our team.
Yeah.
So my question is, sorry, coming with the microphone. Thank you. It's just for the mic. Sure.
So my question is, with this new confluence of technology around powerful political figures, maybe at a level we haven't seen, and you're a Silicon Valley alum, are they onto you? Are we going to see AI defense systems and new ways to hide data and circumvent our attempts to get the data in the way that we've seen with current electronic records? Are you encountering that? Should we watch for that?
I mean, we should definitely watch for it. My favorite is so many legislators have the same reaction to this thing. They say, wow, that's a really powerful tool. That's going to scare the shit out of people. It's going to be terrifying. A lot of people are going to hate this, but I love it. I think everything we do in the legislature should be honest and transparent. I want my constituents to know everything I've done, so I love the tool, but all the other legislators are going to hate it. I know you've heard that from dozens of people. But the question about circumventing it is interesting because this is government data, right? And there are plenty of ways to circumvent government data. Let's say hypothetically some Silicon Valley billionaire got access to all the data in the federal government. Who knows what could happen, hypothetically. But the trick is that because these are journalists running this tool, ideally we're going to see stuff like that, right? And when something jumps out at you as being weird, you're going to stop and look it up. Also, we're publishing a bunch of data on this website. The stories that come out of this data are reported by human reporters who use these not as pre-written stories, but as tips, as a scribble in your notebook, a place to start. And that's a piece I don't think we ever want to lose.
Yeah, I want to get to some of the stories we've produced out of this year, but you know what we have shown about the way the place works. I wonder if they're going to push back on it. I don't know how they would do it, but you know, if I lived in that building, I would be worried about this kind of coverage. So I want to get to the rest before, and then we'll take questions again. So now we'll look at the tip sheets, and these are not public. These are only for reporters who sign up and register with CalMatters to get access to them. We're going to give it out to any reporter who wants to cover the legislature. So, and these tip sheets were really designed. I mean, my mantra to the construction team for the last year and a half is the Modesto B reporter who doesn't know how to cover the Capitol, or doesn't cover the Capitol, doesn't have a lot of time, they need to look at this sheet and see a story they can turn around in a couple hours. And if we can get, the local coverage of state representatives, it's a game changer. There's 120 legislators in California. Most of them, there's almost no coverage, if any. You can't find a story. And so, and they respond to CalMatters, they respond more when it's in their district. So anyway, that's the goal of these tip sheets. And we did a beta test that I'll show you some of the results of in August with about 6 different news organizations around California that generated stories off of tip sheets. And then we took that feedback and did a redesign, and now they're going out right now to all the media in California. So this is this is the page that if you are a reporter, you can sign in and you'll see these cards. And these are all bill discussions. And you can set up your profile so that I'm going to filter all these bill discussions by, I just put in Buffy Wicks and Josh Becker here as 2 legislators. And you can filter by topic. You could search by keyword. You could filter by legislator. It's something we are just now experimenting with is filtering by region. And we're actually going to make that like hyper local. Like you can not just the Los Angeles area, but Long Beach or Southgate or some of the smaller communities. And you can also I can clear all the filters and I can just see everything, every tip sheet that's generated. And then the other thing is these numbers in the top. This is still a work in development. It's a reflection of the quality of the story idea that the AI generated. So the idea being, there's a lot of story ideas that are generated here, but without getting too technical into the weeds or beyond my knowledge, we train the AI with things we call phenoms. And I thought that was a tech word. Everybody knew it. No, Cal Poly invented it. That's their word. So anyway, talking about phenom. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, we call them phenoms. A phenom is something like, show me when a legislator votes against their money, or show me when they vote against their party, or show me when Gavin Newsom endorsed a bill, or we have probably 50 different
Or when they
phenoms.
don't vote.
Yeah. So we have about 50 different phenoms, and so that number is a reflection of the number of phenoms that are triggered by that bill discussion. And so, and some of the phenoms are weighted more than others, so it's not exact reflection, but, and this is still something we've got to get better at. There's still some things that are ranked low that are good ideas, and we're trying to, okay, what did we miss? But anyway, that's so that you can filter just for your interests, and then the best ideas should go to the top of the list.
It's just like every reporter's editor. Some ideas are better than others, right?
You've got several examples of legislators voting against their campaign contributors. Do you have any examples of legislators voting with their contributors for awful bills, like a bill to raise interest rates?
I'm right with you.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'd say the first generation of the AI story ideas we generated was, I'll tell you, the Cal Poly people, they're linguists. And so the first ideas were really about, the story idea was like how long somebody talked. And I went, that's not a story. So by the end of the year, though, the low-hanging fruit was to train the AI to look for the relationships between the supporters and opponents of the bill and the legislators who are voting on that bill. And so relationships in terms of, money, or in terms of their past, how much they vote in sync with each other. And so we can see those relationships, and so the AI, whenever it sees a bill discussion, it'll pull those into the tip sheet like I'm just about to show you. This is the story idea that was written by AI. And you can see this is Senator Richard Roth, who voted in favor of a bill, but it says deviated from his historical alignment with the California Medical Association. So he voted against CMA. And so it's telling you, reporter, take a look at this. Here's a summary of the bill. These are both generated by ChatGPT. These are summaries. The AI that we built to write the story idea, it just cobbled together a bunch of those phenoms, and it was really clunky. So this is all automatically produced in a matter of hours. And so that clunky thing goes off to ChatGPT and comes back and populates the tip sheet. And then the original language that we sent to ChatGPT is down below, so you can check that. And then also right here is the bill summary that was written by ChatGPT. Right here is the language that ChatGPT used to. So before you write a story, check that. But anyway, you can see the vote. There's a couple of metrics here. For reporters who don't cover the Capitol, we tried to give you a sense of whether this bill is significant or not. This bill has the number of people who testified is higher than average. The organizations that took a position is higher than average. The amount of money by those organizations that took a position is way higher than average. And then here's a look at, on this bill, all the organizations in support, all the organizations against, how much money in total was on the yes side, and how much money total was on the no side. And then, one more layer, look at that. I can see every legislator who was on this committee, and I can see their relationship to any organization that took a position on this bill. So there's the California Medical Association. They were against this bill. That's their position. Their success rate of getting their agenda through the legislature is 53%. This is how much money CMA has donated over this time period. And then for each legislator, I can see how all these legislators who voted yes are voting against CMA. This is their alignment score, how often they usually vote together. And what's striking here for a reporter, these legislators vote, between 80 and 90% of the time with CMA. They all voted against CMA. And then here's all the money that CMA has given to each of those individual legislators. So you've got the building blocks of a story. The people to call, the questions to ask, and you can figure out why that happened. Why did they vote against CMA? I can tell you why, but it also pulls quotes from the hearing, and the quotes are linked right to that place in the transcript that I showed you earlier. It's getting better at this, but it's told to pull quotes that are for and against, and quotes from people who testify and from legislators, so you can get a sample. And then there's a display of everybody who testified, what their affiliation is and what their position is, and a link straight to their testimony. And then there's a couple other just this is all the complete collection of notes that the AI generates, just so we have a copy of it, but it basically is summarized above. And then there's a couple of other data visualizations that, we got mixed feedback on whether to include these or not, so we just left it in there for now. But these are different ways to look at the same thing that's above. This is a look at all the money and who it went to on the committee by SEIU. And you can see the bars obviously are a reflection of how much money. And then this is, these little speedometers are a reflection of everybody on the committee and how much they vote with any organization that was a supporter or opponent on that bill. And then there's a link to any past tip sheet that has been generated about this same bill. So that is our tip sheets.
What's the best story that's come out of this?
That's what I'm getting to next. Good.
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll do that. Where did I put those? There we go. So one of my favorite stories, one of our first stories, was something you could never do as a reporter. Nobody in the Capitol even knew this data. We looked at every vote cast by a sitting legislator for the last 5 years, 1 million votes. And we didn't know what we were going to find. We found the Democrats, who are a supermajority in California, more than 2/3 of the legislature, vote no less than 1% of the time. In fact, last year it was 0.5% of the time. So basically everything that makes it to the floors, it's going through, I mean, and there were all these comments in the story about how it kind of reflects a rubber stamp process in public. And, like I say, that I think, anybody in the building was aware of the pattern like that, but nobody had seen the data. And I mean, this is not speculation. It's not quoting somebody else. It's empirical data that we can link to every single one of those 1 million votes. So we can see how many times they voted no, how many times they voted yes. And then CBS News did a story about that story and about digital democracy, and they took it one step further. There was when legislators, instead of voting no, a lot of times they don't vote, and not voting counts as a no to kill a bill. And so, but there's no fingerprints on it, right? So the CBS reporter had been covering a group of mothers of children who had died from fentanyl poisoning and who were advocating for bills about fentanyl sentences and criminal issues. And they looked at digital democracy to find out what happened to the bills on fentanyl. And what they found was that a couple of them died not because anybody voted against them. They died because they sat there and didn't vote. You could see them in the video. They're sitting there. They heard the hearing, and then they didn't vote. And so these mothers were outraged, and then they went to the chair of the committee, as the TV reporter did, and said, "Yeah, this is something that needs to be changed." So, and then another related thing, we looked at all the bills in the last session that died and how they died. There's about 5,000 bills every year, about 2,300 that don't pass, and only 25 of the 2,300 were actually voted down. The others get set aside, in a committee without a vote, and there are deadlines in the process, and when the deadline passes, if it doesn't progress, it dies. So you have a whole process that doesn't have any fingerprints on killing legislation. There's no record of who made that decision. Nobody's name is on it. So and when I talked about the opacity of the process, this is what we're finding with, I do think that having the data, the empirical evidence, rather than, just advocates or people with some kind of agenda making those kind of accusations, it's a game changer. And one, as Neil was saying, there's one legislator that we found who has never voted no in 6 years, over 7,000 votes. And so we actually we told the AI to build a phenom about, when Senator Mike Fong votes no, let us know. Because we're going to find, I can write the lead right now, He finally found something he didn't like. And then we also caught something in the transcript that this wasn't a hearing with no reporters in it, but there was a chair of a committee who admonished another legislator who was introducing his bill that there's a policy against negotiating amendments in public. And so we saw that in the transcript, and what? There's a policy against negotiating in public, which means that it's negotiated in private, which means there's probably stakeholders in the meeting. Yeah. And so we went to the leadership in the Assembly and the Senate, and they said, yeah, we've told committee chairs they have discretion on that, but that there are so many bills and they don't have that much time, and negotiating amendments in public takes too long, and so that should be done in private. And so coming out of this session, one of the things they did was finally they put a cap on how many bills legislators could introduce. They lowered what the cap was. So I think that story contributed to that, because and then, like I said, I'll just show you, this is part of the beta test, and this is the Orange County Register. This was a story they did that was written off of a tip sheet. This was the Merced Focus that did a story off the tip sheets, and this was actually a McClatchy story that ran statewide, but different media that are using tip sheets. So that's, I don't want to take up any more time. I'll take some more questions.
Please raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. Again, it's for the live stream, so those folks can hear what you're saying.
How big is your database? I mean, what kind of computing power do you need to sustain this?
It's in the cloud. I mean, Neil knows how much we pay for it more than I do, but
Yeah, I think one of the worries we had was about the cost of doing all this. And it's a bunch of data, but our Amazon bill is like $3,000 a month. I mean, the cost of things of storage has come down so much, right? As we think about how to scale this, the data is one thing. The video, which is part of that data, is obviously huge. But we're looking at different ways to do the video. We're looking at partnerships, companies like YouTube and other folks who collect video for a living. Ideally, they'll do some of that for us so we can offload some of that as we go bigger and spread this out. We've gotten some corporate help, not as much as we might like. But both the cost and the scope of needing to store this data has not been anywhere near, I think, the problem we thought it would be 2 years ago, because technology and storage costs have come down so much.
And how long will you archive this information?
I don't think we have any plan to ever retire anything. The value of the data is the history. I wish we had all the data back to 1849, right? The value is in that historical story. So the real question, I think, is not how long are we going to archive, but is when are you going to go back and do the last 10 years?
yeah.
In your spare time.
So I have two questions. The first is, so the two questions I have is, the first, do you query the database using SQL? I guess what's the back-end process for that?
Wow, I'm a journalist, remember? Yeah, I think it is SQL.
Okay, and the second question I had, I honestly forgot it, but I can come back to it later.
No worries. Given that a lot of this is from legislative documents, how quickly can you update after there's an election? And is that a manual process? Does it come after the results, or does it just wait until they're sworn in the legislature?
In the state where it takes us a month to count the ballots?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the new legislature's sworn in on December 4th this year, or last year, and so we have time between the election and when they're sworn in to know who to populate. On those legislative pages, almost everything is automated. We write the bio still, and there's a couple of other things that we do manually. But most of the data, 99% of the data on the site is automatically generated.
The tip sheets are incredible and have so many elements that you would need for a story, obviously. Have you considered, or is there any talks of taking it a step further and using those tip sheets to generate daily stories using the technology?
Yeah, there are two angles we're thinking about. One of them is that reporter at the Modesto Bee, who Rick probably recruited, is maybe somebody who's got an hour to do a story and knows nothing about covering the legislature, and also has 3 other stories on their plate. Why wouldn't we just deliver them a fully written story, right? Especially what we do is we create all these stories and we deliver them to everybody in the state anyway. So we're thinking about how to do that in a sort of a scaled way that would say to the newsroom, let us know what you need. If you've got the reporter who's got the skills and the time, you can take that tip sheet and just run with it, see you later. Send us a story when you're done. We'd love to see it. If you need us to do this for you or to walk you through it or to give you the story recipe with 3/4 of the story written and call this member of the city council at this number to get a quote because you literally have 15 minutes, maybe we should be doing that. The other aspect of this is how do we generate different kinds of tip sheets for different kinds of stories off different kinds of data, and eventually, this is not easy, but eventually we have to be able to expand this to city councils, to school boards, and then to the obscure things, the water districts and all the other crazy stuff that nobody knows anything about. It's not easy to do. One of the reasons we're looking at other state legislatures is it is easier to take a 2 houses of a legislature and a bunch of committees model and apply that to another state versus the 5 people on the LA County Board of Supervisors, right? So there's a lot of work to be done here, and ideally, as more and more people find out about this and we get more support for this kind of work, we get the resources we need to do a lot more of it.
Yeah, and I just add that, you could look at that tip sheet. Somebody has to call Senator Roth and ask why he voted against CMA. I mean, the tip sheet will tell you who to call and what the question is, but, these tip sheets by definition are for reporters.
For the stories that are written based on the AI tools, how do you disclose to readers that the AI tools were used to write those stories? And what do you disclose?
Well, just to be clear, none of the words are written by AI in the stories.
For sure. Yeah.
But the use of the tool.
Well, I mean, everything there is from a public government document and linked to it. And so you're not pulling from something that AI generated. AI, all it did was go in the database and pull out what you want and put it on the table for you. But, the disclosure, I don't mind disclosing it. I'm happy to disclose anything. But I mean, what you're, as a reporter, quoting from is a public government document. I mean, the one thing that I think I'd love to brand is that alignment meter, because it's still public government data. But the ability for our tool to really put together that vote and that organization and that money and that history of votes all in that one little interactive. I mean, if you want to attribute that to digital democracy, great.
That's real data analysis. And another angle here is that has commercial value, right? If we find the folks who would pay for that information, we don't want to charge people in California to find out about their government, but if we can find commercial revenue streams out of this stuff, maybe that's what pays for the nonprofit journalism behind it.
How do you pay for it?
Please hold. This gentleman raised his hand.
As a follow-up on AI disclosure, they had a bill and a discussion last session that politicians should should not use AI for promotion, and if so, they should disclose. I think that's an interesting point of view. And one addition that would be interesting is to track on a bill how it changed over time. For example, the House versus the Senate, and when it's originally submitted, because sometimes what is removed is also quite indicative of interesting
Especially in
aspect.
California, where they sometimes remove the entire contents of the bill and put something else in the same bill.
Yeah,
No,
that's
you're
all
right.
in there. It's all in every iteration of the bill, and what's been crossed out is X'd out, so you can see what was taken out and what was added.
So how much would it cost to create a CalMatters?
I think there are two questions there. One is how much would it cost to rebuild this database for Florida? The other is what would it cost to build a statewide nonprofit news organization doing the same thing we're doing in California? There are organizations in Florida doing some of this work, and I'll let the people who know better. There's 3 or 4 nonprofit news organizations in Florida doing amazing work. And what we find is there are, I think there's now 35 or 40 statewide news organizations, nonprofit news organizations doing this kind of stuff. They range from giant statewide newsrooms to 2 people doing investigative work, 2 people focused on a certain topic. They're very different in every place. The actual replication of this product, of this database, to be able to work in Florida is what we're trying to figure out right now. We're testing with both Hawaii and Texas because Hawaii is, not because we want to visit there, Hawaii is relatively simple in its data structure, in the amount of video. It's a smaller legislature. They have the number of hours of video. All of it's already on YouTube, and the Honolulu Civil Beat people they've already got a lot of the data that we want to use. So we're trying it with them. We're also doing it with the Texas Tribune, which has the opposite. They have a legislature that talks forever, many hours of video, ton of bills, lots going on, and the Tribune, unlike most news organizations, has already built its own data layer of all kinds of stuff about candidates and layers and layers and layers of data they have that they want to incorporate into this. So the Tribune is a really tricky build of this. The Honolulu one is relatively simple. If we can get those two done this year and really understand what it takes, what the cost is, what the incremental cost is of adding the next ones on, the goal is to be able to do a bunch more very quickly after that.
Yeah, I don't know why Texas is in session half as much as California, and they talk twice as much. How does that happen?
Is it the talk? But it's the length of the video because they talk slower, right?
Yeah.
They actually vote on the bills. There you go. That's time, guys. Oh. Yep. Time.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks to Dave and Neil, and we'll be setting up for our last session, which will start in about 5.